October 18th, 2013. It's a night of celebration in the glamorous resort city of Los Cabos, Mexico. Luxurious beachfront villas glow beneath glittering lights, music fills the air, champagne flows freely, and elegantly dressed guests mingle without a care, utterly unaware of the sinister shadow moving silently among them. But amid this joyous scene, a masked presence lurks, a figure disguised as a clown, vibrant yet strangely chilling. This isn't an entertainer hired for the party. It's a predator concealed beneath bright colors and painted smiles. He blends effortlessly into the celebration, edging closer to his unsuspecting target, Francisco Rafael Arellano Felix, the former boss of the notorious Tijuana Cartel. As laughter echoes around the poolside, the clown reaches Felix and, without hesitation, draws a handgun concealed within his costume. A single, blaring gunshot rips through the festive atmosphere. The music stops. Laughter turns to screams. Felix collapses, the life instantly drained from his stunned face. This is not a random act of violence. It's a ruthless execution, a chilling message to the criminal underworld. The killer behind the mask is José Rodrigo Gamboa, better known as El Chino Ántrax. Feared and revered, he is no ordinary assassin, but one of the most infamous hitmen the Mexican cartels have ever known. This is the shocking true story of El Chino Ántrax. Today's story is about a man named José Rodrigo Aréchiga Gamboa, but you might know him better as El Chino Ántrax. How he got that nickname? Well, we'll get into that in just a bit. But first, let's start from the beginning. El Chino was born on July 15, 1980, in Culiacán, Sinaloa. Now, if you've heard of Culiacán, you probably know it's a city infamous for its connection to Mexico's narco-trafficking world. It's a place where crime runs deep and power comes from some very dark corners. But here's the twist. El Chino's early life wasn't like most kids who grow up in places like this. While many are born into poverty and violence, El Chino's childhood was pretty privileged. He wasn't struggling. He came from a wealthy, respected family. His dad was a government official, and his mom, a well-educated, devout housewife. As you can already tell, El Chino's background wasn't exactly the kind you'd expect from someone whose name would eventually be linked to the criminal underworld. His early life didn't point to a dark future. But there was one crucial factor that would ultimately shape El Chino's path, a geographical one. Remember, El Chino grew up in Culiacán, a city infamous for its crime and violence. And as fate would have it, El Chino didn't just grow up in a rough area. He had some pretty shady neighbors. He lived right next door to the Zambadas, a name that holds serious weight in the world of crime, and we'll see just how significant that proximity would become in shaping El Chino's life and future. Now, some of you might not recognize the name Ismael Zambada, better known as El Mayo, so let's break it down. El Mayo is one of Mexico's most powerful and elusive drug lords and a longtime boss of the infamous Sinaloa cartel. While most people know El Chapo Guzman as the face of the cartel, El Mayo was the man pulling strings from the shadows. Together, they co-founded and co-led the Sinaloa cartel, building it into a criminal empire responsible for drug trafficking, money laundering, and ruthless violence. But after El Chapo was captured, extradited to the U.S., and sentenced to life in prison, El Mayo quietly took over full control. Despite being hunted for decades, he's never spent a day behind bars. Until he got captured on July 25, 2024, when he landed in a private plane at an airport near El Paso, Texas, USA. You've probably heard more about El Chapo because of his flashy escapes and headline-grabbing arrests. El Mayo, on the other hand, preferred silence, operating like a ghost, always present but never seen. Ismael Zambada was known to have many children. Just how many? That remains a mystery, hidden beneath layers of secrecy and shadows. But there were 3 sons who stood out, not just because of their bloodline, but because of their bond with the central figure in today's story, El Chino. There was Vicente Zambada Nibla, better known as El Vicentillo. Then came Ismael Zambada Imperial, El Mayito Gordo, and finally Serafin Zambada Ortiz, who went by the nickname Sarah. These three weren't just sons of a cartel kingpin, they were El Chino's childhood friends. They were all around the same age, and from an early age, they were inseparable. They went to school together, played sports, hung out after class. They grew up side by side. Now, we may never know exactly how much the Zambada boys influenced young El Chino, but one thing is certain. El Mayo didn't keep his sons away from the cartel world. It wasn't just a criminal empire, it was a family business. And El Chino, he was right there in the middle of it. As previously mentioned, El Chino came from a privileged family. He had every opportunity to live a clean, successful life. And even though he was incredibly close to the Zambada brothers, who were already surrounded by the world of organized crime, El Chino never showed any interest in following that path. In fact, what he wanted couldn't have been further from it. He had a dream to become a pilot in the Mexican military. That was the goal. But that dream was cut short before it could even take off. During the physical exam, El Chino was disqualified, not for lack of strength or skill, but because of a skin condition called psoriasis. It's a chronic autoimmune issue that causes red, scaly patches on the skin. Not dangerous, but enough to fail him on medical grounds. So, El Chino had to pivot. With flying out of the picture, he turned his attention to something completely different: architecture. He enrolled in college, ready to build a new future, one brick at a time. While in college, El Chino met a girl. One thing led to another, and before long, they had a daughter. Soon after, they got married. 2 life-changing moments, back to back. And just like that, everything shifted. But not in the way you might hope. With a baby to care for and a wife to support, El Chino had no choice but to drop out of school. Whatever dreams he had of building a future, the right way suddenly felt out of reach. No degree, no job, no real plan, and the weight of being a young father, a husband, and the sole provider. It hit him hard. The bills piled up. The stress mounted. He was drowning before he even had a chance to swim. And in that moment of desperation, when the pressure became too much to bear, El Chino looked back to the only people he knew who never seemed to struggle, his childhood friends, the Zambada brothers. Desperate and out of options, El Chino made a call that would change his life forever. He reached out to his childhood friend, Vicente Zambada Nibla, better known as El Vicentillo, the oldest son of El Mayo and a rising figure within the Sinaloa cartel. El Chino told El Vicentillo straight up. He was broke, struggling, and needed a way out. El Vicentillo didn't hesitate. This wasn't just any friend. This was El Chino, the kid he grew up with. So, he helped him the only way he knew how, by opening the doors to the family business, the cartel. At first, El Chino started at the bottom. Small errands, driving shipments, overseeing cargo deliveries. The kind of work that doesn't get you fame or fortune, just trust. And that's exactly what El Chino earned fast. He wasn't just showing up. He was excelling. Precise, reliable, focused. It didn't take long for El Vicentillo to notice. And when he did, he made a decision that would pull El Chino even deeper into the underworld. He gave him his first real step into the drug trade. It was during this time that El Chino's true talent began to shine. Not with violence, but with brains. He wasn't just another foot soldier in the game. He was a strategist, a mastermind. El Chino came up with a plan so clever, so seamless, that it fooled even the most watchful eyes at the border. Instead of sneaking drugs through backroads or tunnels, he played a different game, one that looked completely legal on the surface. He built a network of legitimate businesses, real companies, real trucks, real paperwork, On the books, they were just regular Mexican trucking companies shipping goods across the border. But hidden inside those shipments, massive loads of cocaine and marijuana. And the beauty of it, Border Patrol never suspected a thing. Truck after truck rolled into the U.S., each one looking clean, each one fully documented. Meanwhile, tons of drugs were moving in plain sight, hidden behind logos, licenses, and signed manifests. El Chino didn't just outsmart the system. He made the system work for him. Thanks to his bold and brilliantly executed plan, El Chino didn't just earn respect. He jumped the ranks within the Sinaloa cartel almost overnight. Word of his sharp mind and fearless ambition spread fast, and it wasn't long before he caught the attention of the man at the very top. El Mayo Zambada himself. El Mayo saw something special in El Chino. A spark, a ruthlessness, maybe even a reflection of himself. And when the boss took notice, everything changed. Suddenly, El Chino wasn't just another soldier in the cartel. He was someone. But with power came blood. The deeper he went, the darker things became. El Mayo's approval wasn't just a compliment. It was a door into a far more dangerous world. And El Chino walked right through it. Whatever innocence he had left, if there ever was any, began to vanish. He wasn't just following orders anymore. He started choosing the most violent jobs, volunteering for hits, seeking out the bloodiest tasks, assassinations, torture. El Chino didn't flinch. Maybe the cartel life had changed him, or maybe it had simply revealed who he really was all along. By this point in his life, something inside El Chino had changed, and not for the better. It was as if he had developed an insatiable thirst for blood. Killing wasn't just part of the job anymore. It became something darker, more personal. He didn't just eliminate enemies. He made examples of them. According to reports, El Chino didn't stop at murder. He mutilated the bodies of rival cartel members and hung them from public bridges with chilling messages scrawled across banners. Warnings to anyone who dared cross his path. It wasn't just brutality. It was psychological warfare. Soon, El Chino's name became synonymous with murder, torture, and blood-soaked violence. In the towns where he operated, whispers began to spread. Eerie rumors that those who died at his hands didn't just suffer in life. They continued to suffer in the afterlife because of the horrific things done to their bodies. The way El Chino dealt with his enemies, the brutal killings, the unspeakable torture, quickly turned him into something more than just a hitman. On the streets, his name started to echo like a warning. A name that would eventually become legend. El Chino Ántrax. Chino, because of his slightly Asian facial features, a nickname that stuck early on. And Antrax. That came from the deadly disease anthrax. Fast, lethal, and feared. Just like El Chino, his name wasn't just a label, it was a message. Danger, brutality, and fear wrapped into one. And El Mayo Zambada, ever the strategist, saw the fear El Chino inspired as a weapon in itself. He didn't waste a second. He brought El Chino deeper into the inner circle, using his reputation as a psychological weapon against rivals. El Mayo made him the personal bodyguard of his eldest son, Vicente Zambada Nibla, El Vicentillo. But El Chino wasn't just a bodyguard. He was the Sinaloa cartel's blade, sharp, loyal, and merciless, a living, breathing instrument of violence. In the world of cartels, he wasn't just a man. He was a killing machine without a conscience. By 2008, the streets of Mexico were erupting in violence, and at the heart of the chaos was a betrayal that would tear apart one of the most powerful criminal alliances in history. The Beltrán Leyva organization, once a key faction within the Sinaloa cartel, had declared war. Originally, the Beltrán Leyva brothers were loyal allies of Joaquín El Chapo Guzmán. They had climbed the ranks together, built an empire together. But everything changed when Alfredo Beltrán Leyva was captured by the Mexican military. The brothers believed El Chapo had sold them out, tipped off the authorities. What followed was a brutal split. The Beltrán Leivas broke away from the Sinaloa cartel, and the betrayal sparked a violent war that swept through northern and central Mexico like wildfire. And while the original feud was between the Beltrán Leivas and El Chapo, El Mayo Zambada, the other major Sinaloa boss, found himself in the middle of it all after El Chapo's arrest. Suddenly, El Mayo and his sons became prime targets. They needed protection, serious protection. And who better to take on that role than a trusted, dangerous figure already close to the family? El Chino Ántrax. But El Chino wasn't just going to stand around as a bodyguard. El Mayo had bigger plans. He gave El Chino a deadly mission: create an elite armed group whose sole job was to protect the Zambada family and eliminate anyone who posed a threat. That group would soon become infamous across Mexico as Los Antrax. Los Antrax wasn't just an armed crew. It was a ruthless, military-style enforcement unit created from the ground up by El Chino Ántrax himself, and he didn't build it alone. At his side were his most trusted men, killers who shared his loyalty, his ambition, and his taste for blood. There was René Velázquez Valenzuela, known on the streets as El Sargento Phoenix, a fearless enforcer with a reputation for brutality. Then came Jesus Pina, El 20, a cold and calculating tactician. And finally, Rafael Guadalupe Felix Núñez, who went by Chinito Ántrax, as vicious and loyal as they come. Together, they formed the core of Los Antrax, a brotherhood forged in violence and bloodshed. Each member wore a silver skull ring, a symbol of their allegiance and a chilling reminder of what they represented: death. The group had two primary missions. First and foremost, protect the Zambada family at all costs. Anyone who so much as threatened El Mayo or his sons had just signed their death warrant. Second, unleash chaos on their enemies. Whether it was the Beltrán Leyva organization, rival cartels, or traitors within, Los Antrax waged a merciless war on anyone who dared to stand in their way. They weren't just soldiers. They were executioners. In the years that followed, El Chino Ántrax, at the head of Los Antrax, transformed into something of a legend, a monster born from blood and power. Under his command, Los Antrax tore through Sinaloa like a storm. Whenever they clashed with the Beltrán Leyva cartel, it wasn't just a gunfight, it was a war zone. Bodies on both sides, and sometimes innocent civilians caught in the crossfire. Then came June 2010, a brutal turning point. A major shootout erupted with the Beltrán Leyva, and El Pancho Antrax, a key figure in the Sinaloa cartel and a top commander within Los Antrax, was killed. His death sent shockwaves through the organization. By the following year, the violence had spiraled so far out of control that even the Mexican authorities stepped in, not just to investigate, but to bring both factions down. They captured 3 members of Los Antrax, but instead of trials or prison time, the men were brutally tortured for information, and then killed. No progress, no peace, just more blood. As 2011 came to a close, El Chino suffered another major blow. His trusted lieutenant, Francisco Arce Rubio, better known as Pancho Arce, was gunned down while playing an indoor soccer match. A rival cartel hit squad stormed the building, opened fire, and left several Sinaloa and Antrax members dead on the turf. Pancho never made it out. That's when something changed in El Chino. A man known for being merciless, for never backing down. Suddenly, he felt fear. This wasn't about pride anymore. This was survival. So he did something unusual. He went to El Mayo. He asked for help. If El Mayo could speak directly with the leaders of the rival cartels, maybe, just maybe, Los Antrax could gain some protection, a buffer from annihilation. El Mayo did reach out. He tried to negotiate, but the answer was clear. There would be no peace. Los Antrax had become too violent, too reckless. In the eyes of their enemies, the only way to stop them was to wipe them out completely. It was February 2012 when the streets ran red with betrayal. Roque Landeros, a loyal soldier of Los Antrax, and 3 other members were gunned down, but not by rival cartels or law enforcement. No, this was something darker, something internal. These men were casualties of a silent war brewing within the Sinaloa cartel itself. El Chapo's own faction had turned against Los Antrax, and their sights weren't just set on the soldiers. They wanted the man at the top, El Chino Ántrax. That same year, U.S. prosecutors charged El Chino with conspiracy to smuggle half a ton of meth and 5 kilos of cocaine into the United States. What El Chino didn't know was that for 6 long months, the DEA had been wiretapping calls, conversations between him and his network of traffickers. As the feds picked off low-level operatives one by one, the pieces began to fall into place. Testimony after testimony pointed in one direction. And soon, they had enough to bring charges against one of Sinaloa's most feared lieutenants. El Chino could feel the pressure closing in. The DEA, Mexican authorities, and even rival factions within his own cartel wanted one thing: the end of Los Antrax, and it was only a matter of time. During this time, El Chino Ántrax developed a full-blown obsession with social media. Instagram and Twitter weren't just apps to him, they were his stage. While most cartel members hid in the shadows, El Chino Ántrax was busy chasing the spotlight. Under a series of fake names, El Chino started showing off his outrageous lifestyle. Private jets, designer clothes, luxury vacations, gold-plated guns, wild parties, and even pet tigers. He wasn't just living like a king, he wanted the world to see it. Despite being a wanted man, El Chino acted like he was untouchable. He partied in VIP lounges in the US, posted pictures of his cash, his weapons, and even shared a snapshot with one of El Mayo's sons. What El Chino didn't realize was that this obsession with spotlight, this need to be seen, would eventually lead him straight to his downfall. By October 2013, the spotlight El Chino chased spilled into the real world. A lavish 63rd birthday party lit up a beachfront villa in Los Cabos. The guest of honor, former Tijuana cartel boss Francisco Rafael Arellano Felix. Champagne flowed, a mariachi band played. Then a clown shuffled through the crowd. The guests laughed. The clown honked a toy horn, posed for photos, and drew a hidden pistol. Bang! Arellano Felix collapsed in a spray of blood and confetti. Cameras flashed, partygoers screamed, and within hours every Mexican news outlet carried grainy cell phone clips of the killer clown. It was the viral infamy El Chino had always wanted, and the final red flag for law enforcement on both sides of the border. For years, El Chino Ántrax stayed one step ahead of the Mexican authorities. Even as he flaunted a lavish lifestyle online, he blurred his face in every photo, thinking that was enough to keep his identity hidden. He went even further, undergoing plastic surgery, altering his fingerprints, anything to erase the man he once was. But here's the thing. While he thought he was hiding in plain sight, he was actually leaving behind a digital trail. A trail of breadcrumbs. What El Chino didn't realize was that the federal agents, especially the DEA, were watching closely. And they noticed something he didn't. In several of his posts, he wore a distinctive skull ring, the same kind worn by members of Los Antrax. That small detail was all it took to confirm the connection. Once the DEA locked onto his social media profiles, there was no escaping them. It was New Year's Eve, 2013, when El Chino Ántrax boarded a flight from Mexico to the Netherlands. His destination, Amsterdam's Schiphol Airport. But what he didn't know was that the DEA was already one step ahead. They had tracked his flight and tipped off Dutch authorities. All eyes were now searching for one thing: a Mexican man wearing a flashy skull ring. Sure enough, when the plane landed, they found him. El Chino was arrested on the spot. He was traveling under a fake name, Norberto Siqueiros Garcia, the identity of a dead Mexican citizen. But it was that signature skull ring that gave him away. El Chino was thrown into a maximum security prison in the Netherlands, but the United States wasn't going to let him stay there for long. They wanted him extradited, and they had a long list of drug trafficking charges waiting for him. Then came the twist. Just a week after his arrest, the U.S. Department of the Treasury hit El Chino with sanctions under the Foreign Narcotics Kingpin Designation Act, a law that freezes assets and bans U.S. citizens from doing business with major drug traffickers. But more importantly, that announcement exposed something huge. El Chino wasn't just another player in the game. He was El Mayo Zambada's top enforcer. But that's not all. He was also working for El Chapo. That meant El Chino was running with both bosses of the Sinaloa cartel, a rare and risky position that might have fueled the infamous tension between the two drug lords. On July 10, 2014, El Chino Ántrax was finally extradited to the U.S. The very next day, standing before a judge in San Diego, he pleaded not guilty. What followed was a legal tug-of-war. His defense team kept delaying the trial, tossing in new evidence, trying to throw off the prosecution. But the game couldn't last forever. On March 20, 2015, El Chino finally pleaded guilty, admitting to a conspiracy to smuggle cocaine and marijuana into the United States. At some point, El Chino Ántrax made a move that shocked many in the underworld. He cooperated with the U.S. government. His intel helped take down key figures within the Sinaloa cartel, but that raises a burning question. Did he flip just to get a lighter sentence, or was it genuine remorse for the blood-soaked life he'd led in Sinaloa? The truth, it might have been a bit of both. After being sentenced, El Chino told the judge he wanted to turn his life around. Maybe find work in construction, maybe remodel homes. It sounded like a man ready for a second chance, but let's be real. It was also clear that his cooperation earned him a sweet deal. El Chino was handed just 7 years behind bars, and since he had already served about a year before pleading guilty, he walked free in March of 2020. The plan was for him to serve 5 more years under probation. But that freedom, it didn't last long, because what came next was the beginning of the end for El Chino Ántrax. By this point, El Chino Ántrax wasn't just hiding. He was living under a new name with a surgically altered face. After cooperating with the U.S. government, he knew one thing for certain. If he ever made contact with his old friends from the Sinaloa cartel, it would be a death sentence. That world doesn't forgive betrayal, and it never forgets. But then, something strange happened. On May 6, just 2 months after his release from prison, El Chino vanished. His probation officer showed up at his house for a routine check-in and found the place empty. No sign of struggle, no goodbye note, just his phone, left behind like a ghost. The moment the prosecutor got the news, alarms went off. The same judge who had sentenced El Chino years earlier wasted no time. A warrant was issued for his arrest. Authorities launched a search, convinced he had fled the country. And they were right. El Chino had quietly returned to Culiacán, slipping back into the city he once ruled from the shadows. He was staying with his sister and her husband, likely hoping for some kind of peace or maybe just a temporary hiding spot. But whatever the reason, the reunion didn't last. 3 days later, the nightmare came. A BMW was found abandoned on a dirt road in Culiacán. Inside were 3 bodies, loaded, lifeless, riddled with bullets. It was El Chino, his sister, and her husband, all executed. But even in death, there was doubt, because of the severe decomposition and the plastic surgery El Chino had undergone. Investigators couldn't confirm it was really him. And in the world of narcos, faking your death is almost a tradition. So authorities turned to the one source that could give them the truth: his family. And after the grim task of identification, it was confirmed. It was El Chino Ántrax. The big question is, did El Chino Ántrax willingly flee to Mexico, only to be hunted down by his own people? Or was he kidnapped straight out of San Diego, dragged back across the border without a choice? We may never know the full truth, but what we do know is this. Chino Ántrax was killed by the very organization that once raised him. Chino was born into their world, recruited by their hand, and in the end, silenced by it. His life began with the Sinaloa cartel, and it ended with them too. A full circle, brutal, unforgiving, and soaked in the same violence he once unleashed as the leader of Los Antrax. This was the life he chose, or maybe the life that chose him. And that brings us to the end of our story. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.